Clonegrim, the perfect clone of Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children. Engineered by Fabius Bile, Clonegrim represents the ultimate what if. What if Fulgrim had never fallen, never became that spooky, slithering snake demon?
Look how they massacred my boy.
In the spirit of Fulgrim Week, we're continuing to celebrate everyone's favorite fabulous Primarch by checking out his clone and breaking down just how powerful he really is. Since, let's be honest folks, Primarch clones do not get any love in this setting of 40k. In today's video we'll cover who he is, his powers and abilities, his feats, and finally where he scales in the wider 40k universe. So let's jump straight into the K-hole. It's time to power scale. Clonegrim is the perfect clone of Fulgrim, created by Fabius Bile and seen exclusively in one book, Clonelord. According to Fabius, this isn't some flawed imitation. Clonegrim is a true identical copy of Fulgrim as he existed before his fall to Slaanesh. And what makes Clonegrim so unique is just how perfect he is, as Fabius Bile himself reflects. He thought of the infant, no, the child, sitting quietly hidden away in his laboratorium. So far the clone showed no sign of abnormality, no sign of the mutations that had afflicted so many of his previous attempts. That in itself made him cautious. The clone had been slumbering since he had been driven from Harmony by Abaddon. It had spent centuries gestating down in the dark. It seemed improbable, if not impossible, and yet it was aware. Perfect Fulgrim, as he must have been millennia ago. Or perhaps Fulgrim as he was always meant to be. That last line is the key to understanding Clonegrim, because it implies that Clonegrim might be Fulgrim if he had never turned to chaos and guttermine. Even Fabius begins to believe that this version could be something far greater, capable of leading a new humanity to its intended destiny. And unlike the original Fulgrim, who fell to excess and damnation, Clonegrim seeks to fix the Emperor's children, to restore them, to redeem them, to undo the rot that had consumed the Third Legion. Outside of his primary goal, similar to the other Primarchs, Clonegrim also grows at an unnatural rate, aging exponentially with years passing in mere hours. His mind also develops alongside his age, rapidly stabilizing with full awareness. And despite being created in the Eye of Terror, where corruption seeps into literally about everything, there are still no signs of mental or physical corruption whatsoever. Fabius fully expected the warp to have tainted the clone before it ever emerged, especially after centuries unprotected in an artificial womb. And yet, Clonegrim is completely fine. He emerges completely intact, completely pure of any taint or mutation by the corrupting force of the warp. Then you get into one of the most important aspects of Clonegrim, his memories. Or should I say, Fulgrim's memories. Because yes, heard, Clonegrim has all of Fulgrim's memories, as Fabius explains. The Primarchs, the first Primarchs, somehow encoded their memories in their blood and marrow, like a cogitator backing up its data. A process I still do not fully understand, and I have not been able to replicate with any success. That is why it was possible to recreate them, you in full. This means Clonegrim remembers being Fulgrim. The Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, the battles, the triumphs, the failures, they're all there.
What have I done?
This is a being waking up with the weight of an entire lifetime already imprinted onto its mind. And because of that, he also understands the horror of what Fulgrim has done and become. Clonegrim is untainted by chaos, yet burdened with the knowledge of it. He feels regret and seeks atonement. So naturally, this raises the question. If he's perfect, uncorrupted, and has Fulgrim's memories, is he literally just a one-to-one copy of base Fulgrim? And the answer is not quite. Because there are real doubts about whether Clonegrim and the Primarch clones in general possess the same warp-based soul as the originals. The original Primarchs are deeply tied to the warp. Their souls playing a massive role in their power, and in Fulgrim's case, that becomes even more complicated because his original soul is likely bound to Slaanesh, as with any demon Primarch. And yet, despite that, Clonegrim still feels like a Primarch. He still has that Primarch aura, that unnatural charisma that compels loyalty and obedience. Even Fabius Bile, who knows this isn't truly Fulgrim, feels that pull. I would not. I only wish to see more petulance, almost a command. Fabius felt the old flicker of subservience within him, the need to please his Gene Father, to obey his every whim and order. Fulgrim, more than his brothers, had commanded complete obedience. Some twist in the helix had chained his sons more tightly to him. It was why so many of them had so eagerly followed him off the edge of the cliff. An unnatural charisma. People wanted to please Fulgrim, to make him happy. That was why he had worked so well with the mortal adherents of the Great Crusade. Millions had hurled themselves into death in order to provide the Illuminator with the road to victory. So as you can see, that Primarch presence or aura is still there. This even works on corrupted Emperor's children later in the book. He even retains that same inhuman beauty, often compared to Sanguinius. That makes him seem more like a divine being than a clone. But despite all of this, Fabius still has his doubts. He recognizes the perfection, the presence, the overwhelming familiarity. But he also knows something is off. But Fabius was not immortal, and he was older now, and this was not Fulgrim. Not really, no matter what his blood whispered or his senses told him. So from here, things get really complicated really fast. Because while logic suggests that Clonegrim should not have the original warped soul of Fulgrim, other evidence kind of muddies the water. In the book The Talon of Horus, Iskandar Kaon encounters other Primarch clones, like Lorgar, who demonstrates psychic abilities even as an infant, implying that he still retained some connection to his warp powers. Because as we all know, during the Horus Heresy, Lorgar awakened his true potential, and so gained psychic abilities that were potent enough to block incoming Titan plasma rounds, and even hurl around tanks. And if that's true, then maybe a Primarch's power isn't entirely tied to their original soul. Or maybe something about the cloning process recreates that connection in a way we don't fully understand. Or maybe when the demon Primarchs ascended, like Fulgrim for example, some portion of their soul was lost and somehow ended up in the clones. There's also the chance that these 40K authors did not coordinate with each other, resulting in this confusing and nonsensical situation. I mean, have you seen Micah Stody's Powerscaling video? It makes me think that these writers don't even talk to each other. So where does that leave us? Clonegrim is for all intents and purposes nearly identical to Fulgrim at his peak during the Great Crusade, but with some key differences. He lacks the lived battlefield experience of the original, at least for now, which I'm going to admit it, I don't think Clonegrim is ever getting out of Drazen, the Infinites Museum. But maybe one day he'll escape and he'll reach his true potential. The whole Clonegrim situation is weird as hell. Between the inherited memories, the questionable Primarch warp soul mechanics, and the fact that he somehow avoided corruption entirely, even while being in the Eye of Terror, results in him existing in a strange gray area where he is both Fulgrim and not Fulgrim at the same time. What we can say for sure is that Clonegrim is not some lesser imitation. He is a Primarch in every way that actually matters. And if that's the case, then the next question becomes obvious. What can he actually do? Let's next break down his powers, weapons, and feats. So since Clonegrim is the perfect clone of Fulgrim, we first need to establish what base Fulgrim can do, which will set the foundation for everything that comes next. Just like all Primarchs, Fulgrim has all the standard Primarch abilities, like superhuman strength, speed, or durability. But unlike Fulgrim, who is a master duelist, Clonegrim most likely lacks that skill, as he may have Fulgrim's memories, but he seems naive in the real world, as he acts almost like a child. But this is where things get really weird, because while Clonegrim should scale to all of that on paper, being a perfect clone and all, there are some inconsistencies. For one, there's no clear indication that Clonegrim fully possesses that same warp ability that Fulgrim has, or at least he doesn't demonstrate it outright. That honestly could be though, because Clonegrim is only in, one book, but as it stands, it's not something we can confidently give him. There's also moments that suggest that Clonegrim's physical abilities may be lesser than a real Primarch. For example, his speed isn't quite on the level you'd expect from a true Primarch, as he isn't easily outspeeding Chaos Space Marines, in a way someone like Fulgrim should, since he is one of the fastest Primarchs. For example, in the Palatine Phoenix, it's said that an entire fortress could have its weapons pointed at Fulgrim, and it wouldn't matter because he's just too fast. Alarms blared and officers cried out, trying to impose some sense of order on a situation spinning rapidly out of control. They thought their mountain fastness impregnable, and most of their weaponry was directed outwards, awaiting the approach of the Continental Army. Even if it had been turned inwards, it would have done them little good. Fulgrim was too fast, too deadly.
Good. You see that red blur? That's me. That too. There I am again.
My name is Fulgrim, and I'm the fastest man alive. While on the other hand, Clonegrim's speed does not seem to quite match this. Do not take him from us again, Fabius, Alcanex said, please. He raised his sword. Damn you, Spider, listen to me. Fulgrim turned, reaching out to stop him. But Alcanex was already moving, his face a mask of grief. Trazyn laughed hollowly and gestured as Alcanex rushed at Fabius, blade held high. He, Fulgrim, and the rest of the Emperor's children on the bridge froze, as if they were not flesh and bone, but statues. The Primarch still had a puzzled expression on his face, like a child being reprimanded for something he did not understand. So here we see that Clonegrim can't react or catch a Chaos Space Marine, and can't avoid being captured by Trazyn the Infinite. But being outsped by the temporal shieldings of Trazyn isn't exactly crazy, since Necron tech go brr. But by a Marine is where warning flags start to sound. Now yes, Chaos Space Marines are enhanced by the Warp and the Chaos Gods, but they are still nowhere near a Primarch's level. So the fact that Clonegrim isn't able to react or catch up to the Marine in question implies that once again, Clonegrim may not exactly have the same physical abilities as the true base Fulgrim. Before moving on, I will say though, that the author of Clonelord, Josh Reynolds, is notorious for writing Primarchs weaker than they actually are. Although he did write the Palatine Phoenix, where Fulgrim is stated to be the fastest among the Primarchs. Making this truly one confusing situation. God damn it, sometimes Powerscaling 40K is so gosh darn hard. As for his equipment, there's nothing specifically special, or anything iconic. He's described pretty plainly in the book Clonelord, as being a giant clad in rudimentary armor, stained in royal purple. The blade it wielded was little more than a massive cleaver, but the being used it with a skill and grace at odds with its crudity. The saw-edged bite sank into ceramite with ease, rupturing the flesh and bone within. A Space Marine was flung high by the giant's backswing, his body unraveling as it traveled the length of the bay. So yeah, nothing flashy, just raw skill and strength. And that's where his feats really come in. Because even without peak gear, Clonegrim absolutely bodies Chaos Space Marines. His strength alone is ridiculous. At one point, he crushes a Space Marine head like it's an egg. The Primarch held the Space Marine's head between his palms, as Fabius watched. Fulgrim slowly crushed his captive skull, with no more effort than a man might smash an egg. And in combat, he's just as dominant. We see him tearing through corrupted Emperor's children like they're nothing. She caught sight of him, striding through the press of battle, his blade reaping a red toll. Only the most debased of the Emperor's children tried to stand in his way, and these fell quickly enough. All of his uncertainty was gone now. He rampaged among them, killing with grace. But there was an anger there as well, and he roared in fury as he killed them. So when you put it all together, Clonegrim's kit looks like this. He has Primarch level strength, easily crushing Space Marines, solid durability by scaling, and although we do have some moments where his speed is questionable, it is possible that he may have been caught off guard. The author of the book simply didn't know what the hell he was doing when he was scaling Clonegrim, or it is possible that he may not have the exact physical abilities as the true Primarch Fulgrim. His weapons are basic, but in his hands, they don't need to be anything more. Which leads us perfectly into our next section. Because now that we understand what Clonegrim brings to the table, we next need to ask, where does he actually scale in the wider 40k universe? Alright, my beloved herd, as always, it's everyone's favorite part of these How Powerful videos. Scaling Clonegrim using a Gauss Bauer pyramid, with the same tiers we use every single time, to keep things as consistent and at least somewhat sane. At the bottom, we've got the Chapter Master tier. This is where you'll find Space Marine Chapter Masters, Orc War Bosses, and Tau Commanders. Above that is the Enhanced tier, reserved for characters who massively outperform standard elites. Here we find Grey Knights, Custodes, and most Demon Princes. After that is the Low Primarch tier. Here we're looking at Avatars of Cain, Greater Demons, and the weaker base Primarchs, like Lorgar, Alfarius and Omegon, and Guilliman. Then we hit the High Primarch tier, the heavy hitters among the base Primarchs. Characters like Sanguinius, the Lion, Horus Lupercal, Conrad Kurz, or Lehman Russ, all of whom consistently outperform their brothers and stand at the absolute top of what base Primarchs can achieve. After that comes the Planetary tier, where things start getting a little ridiculous. This includes Catan Shards and the Demon Primarchs, beings that can threaten or destroy entire worlds. Above that is the Cosmic tier, reserved for entities operating on a metaphysical or galactic scale. The Silent King and the Emperor in his 30k prime fall into this tier. And finally, at the very tippy top of the 40k universe, we have the Multiversal tier. This is where you find the Emperor on the Golden Throne, Chaos-empowered God Emperor Horus, the Chaos Gods, or the Volcatan like the Nightbringer or the Void Dragon. These are entities that can influence multiple dimensions and reality itself. Now with the tiers laid out, let's scale Clonegrim against the rest of the 40k universe. So right off the bat, based on everything we know, Clonegrim very clearly sits above everything in the Chapter Master or Enhanced tier. The fact that he can easily crush Chaos Space Marines, carve through Emperor's children like they're fonder, and since, he's the perfect clone of Fulgrim, he should have the same exact physical abilities as base Fulgrim. There's no world where he's not at least operating on a Primarch level. So that means we're either dealing with low or high Primarch. On paper, Clonegrim should absolutely be in the high Primarch tier. He's a perfect clone of Fulgrim, who, as we established, is potentially one of the greatest duelists, is probably one of the top 3 Primarchs in terms of speed, and although he wasn't technically in base, Fulgrim has 2 confirmed Primarch wins. But as you all remember, Clonegrim may have the memories of Fulgrim, but he does not have the battlefield experience or the same skill set. He also is not equipped with any legendary war gear, artificer armor, or anything close to what a proper Primarch could be bringing into battle. Now sure, we could sit here all day and speculate about how strong he would be if he was fully kitted out. But at the end of the day, that's just guesswork. We have to scale him based on what we actually see on paper. So that means where we place Clonegrim today factors in the fact that he wields a goddamn cleaver like a butcher throughout the book Clonelord. Clonegrim's speed may also not be at the same level as Fulgrim's, but that might be an author inconsistency, or that Clonegrim may have been caught off guard. So what do we do with the perfect clone? His feats, while undeniably impressive, are mostly centered around dominating Chaos Space Marines. And while that's no small accomplishment, it's also something that every Primarch should be able to do without much difficulty. There's no evidence of him outperforming other Primarch level beings, no high-end duels against top-tier opponents, and no confirmed showcase of him using a warp ability that Fulgrim would have had. If only there was another Primarch clone. Oh wait, there is. Yep, I'm talking about Clone Horus, from the book Talon of Horus. And just like Clonegrim, cloned Horus, or as I like to call him, Cloris, is also a perfect clone. It was Horus Lupercal, charging into our loose ranks and slaughtering us with Worldbreaker. He came from one of the far antechambers, awoken by Fabius in readiness for this moment. I threw energy at him. I threw lightning. I threw panic and hatred and anger in a seething bolt of mutagenic warp fire. It burst what remained of his force field in a whiplash of air pressure, and boiled the skin and hair from his head. Nothing more. I was still too weak, and he was far, far too strong. Nefertari took to the air, cutting past him and swinging with her glaive. She was a silken blur, moving faster than I had ever seen her move. Fast enough to weave between the bolt shells streaming around her. Fast enough to slice through the Primarch's cheek, severing half of the muscles in his charred face. But he had weaved aside. She'd missed the killing blow. The female who had killed Legion warlords, without shedding a single diamond of sweat, had missed her killing blow. Horus was too fast, even for her. Telmacon's twin swords burst through the front of Horus's ruined breastplate in a spray of almost toxically rich blood. Without a pause, and faster than even Telmacon could withdraw them, Horus grabbed the blades in a single gauntleted fist, snapped them, then spun around and backhanded the swordsman across the chamber. Telmacon hammered into the far wall with the telltale resonant crash of ceramite. So here we see the perfect clone of Horus absolutely demolishing several powerful Chaos Space Marines, which includes Iskandar Kaon, Telmacon, and Lior. Throughout this fight, the perfect clone tanks multiple psychic attacks from Kaon, which burn and char his body, but he seems completely unfazed. His speed and reaction times are faster than a Dark Eldar Scourge, and manages to tank multiple wounds throughout the course of the fight, which includes Telmacon stabbing him through the chest with 2 swords. This clone of Horus only dies when Abaddon stabs him through the chest with the Talon of Horus and then shoots him 6 times with the Stormbolter attached. And mind you, cloned Horus is not exactly fighting Abaddon at this moment. So if Cloris was able to do this, then we can make that correlation that Clonegrim should be able to do the exact same thing, including tanking multiple wounds from various different sources, reacting faster than a Dark Eldar, and having the strength to bully Space Marines. Now I will admit that we kind of already knew this. It just verified the feats we already had. So where to put him, where to put him? I'm going to say that Clonegrim lands in the low Primarch tier, but at the very top of it. He's stronger than Greater Demons, most likely Avatars of Cain, and base Lorgar Aurelian, but I think he stops at probably Alfarius and Omegon and definitely Guilliman. I mean, we know for a fact that base Lorgar Aurelian is said to be the weakest of all the base Primarchs, as he is more of a statesman than a swordsman, and he cannot stand in a duel against any of his brothers. And that Lorgar was still able to defeat Angarath, a powerful greater demon of Khorne. So I think Clonegrim, even though not as skilled or experienced as a Primarch like say Alfarius, Omegon, Guilliman, or maybe even the Lion, would still be able to take on Lorgar and defeat him. Simply because Lorgar is a bum, guys. He is a bum. He has hardly any skill in combat, at least in his base form. I'm not talking about his Psychic Awakened form, guys. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about him during the Great Crusade. And while Clonegrim does not really have any proper gear on him, he does have the abilities of base Fulgrim. Even if there are examples of him operating below that, I think those are outliers or inconsistent points made by the author. And so Clonegrim should have the speed, durability, and strength that base Fulgrim during the Great Crusade had. So it is possible that Clonegrim could outright blitz Lorgar and leave him a smear on the floor. Like, we have literal quotes from Leman Russ saying that he could spit on Lorgar and he would drop. So I'm pretty confident that Clonegrim could take on the bald-headed preacher. And due to scaling, he would also be above a Greater Demon or an Avatar of Cain. But Primarchs like Guilliman or Alfarius, who are incredibly experienced in close combat, would definitely be able to beat the perfect clone of Fulgrim. Clonegrim feels a lot like a Primarch with untapped potential. He has the genetics, the memories, the foundation, everything needed to become a high-tier Primarch. But he hasn't had the time, experience, or narrative development to fully get there yet. And he probably never will. Thanks for that, Trazen, you son of a bitch. So the final placement is Clonegrim falls in the low Primarch tier. Above Lorgar, Greater Demons, and Avatars of Cain, but below Guilliman, Alfarius, and Omegon. So yeah, overall, Clonegrim might not have the craziest feats, and he sits below most of the Primarchs excluding Lorgar, but the potential is there. I hope you guys enjoyed this installment of Powerscaling Peeps as we continue Fulgrim Week, which will end on 420 with our third and final video. What if Fulgrim remained loyal? So be there or be square. A huge shout out to my Patreon and YouTube members, Impossy Paul, Tyler Pick 7, Musty, Keydri, Seth Capizilla, Lag, Cunning Karkle, Caleb White, Dinkleberry, Omar, Ultrazon 27, and Michael Skipper 7277. You folks are the real heroes, and I can't thank you enough. And I hope you all stick around for the conclusion of Fulgrim Week. As always, stay milked, and I'll see you very, very soon.